Welcome back to Wall Again, and in this video I'm going to be ranking Metallica's albums from worst to best in my opinion, and this is just going to be the studio albums. So before we dig in, if you're new to my page and you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, and if you can like and leave a comment below, I'll be very interested to hear what other people's rankings are. So the Metallica studio albums, there's been 11 in total since 1983, and I'm going to rank them all in my opinion, and this is my opinion at the moment, so this may change, but having a listen back the last few weeks and running through them and writing down what I like, what I dislike about the albums, this is the ranking I've come up with from 11 to 1, worst to best. Okay, so let's dive straight in. First album, number 11, bottom of the list, worst album Metallica have released in my opinion, Saint Anger from 2003. 8th studio album by the band, sold over 5 million copies to date, and number 1 all over the world, but I don't think it's a great album at all. It was produced by Bob Rock, but the production on this album is really poor. It was recorded at Metallica HQ in San Rafael, and the band lineup for this one was Hetfield, Ulrich Hammett, and Bob Rock actually played bass on this one. Some of the standout tracks are Some Kind of Monster and Invisible Kid, but overall it's a very long, drawn out album. The snare sound is bad. It's very hard to listen to again in my opinion. Definitely the worst album in Metallica's catalogue, and no guitar solos obviously, so that's another reason. Okay, so that's the worst album in my opinion. Album number 10. It's Hardwired to Self-Destruct from 2016. So a lot of people might think that this is a return to form and it's back to their thrash roots, but not for me. I think this album, it's over 2 discs on CD. It's just way too long and drawn out, and a lot of the songs, the riffs, they're just not memorable. So it's a 10th studio album by Metallica. It's sold over 3 million units to date. Again, number 1 all over the world, 25 different countries. Was released on their Blackened label. I think it was the first album that was released on the Blackened label, and it was produced by Greg Fidelman with James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich. So this is getting into where Metallica are cozy and comfortable. They're recording in their own studio through their own record label with their own producer. So not much outside influence, but to me this album just seems laboured. Robert Trujillo obviously plays bass on this album. It's his second album that he's played bass on, and standard tracks for me, like Atlas Rise is a good track, to be honest. Now That We're Dead has some good riffing in it. Confusion is okay. Spit Out the Bone is a good track, but 77 minutes long, 12 songs, it's just too long in my opinion. And as well, Kirk Hammett's guitar solos, apparently he had recorded a load of riffs and ideas, and then he lost his phone, and it was James Hetfield who provided the riffs for the song. But in terms of the guitar solos, Kirk Hammett just basically admitted that he went in and improvised over every single song and didn't work out any solos, didn't think anything out in advance of going into the studio. And it sounds like that. It sounds lazy from him, and it's disappointing to hear that. So that's why it's at number 10 on my list. Number 9 is Reload. Reload was released in 1997. 7th studio album by the band, sold almost 9 million records, and number 1 in the US, Austria, Finland, Germany, New Zealand, Norway and Sweden. Released through Elektra Records, produced by Bob Rock with James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich. Recorded at the plant in California, and obviously this was the 1990s lineup of James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett and Jason Newsted. Standard tracks on this one for me are Fuel and The Memory Remains, and I also like The Unforgiven too. It's okay. It's not a bad album. It's not a metal album. It's probably more of a hard rock blues album, but it's not bad. But it certainly should be number 9 on the list in my opinion. I think it's better than the previous 2 albums, but certainly not as good as the rest of the albums on the list. Okay, album number 8 on the list is the latest release, 72 Seasons. I think this is a great album, to be honest, and I think everything from here on in is very good or great, so definitely worth checking out. So 72 Seasons is the latest album released by Metallica, 11th studio album, released last year in 2023. Album sales to date equivalent over 1 million sold to date, but with streaming it's very hard to quantify that. Released through Blackened Records, produced by Greg Fiddleman again, so the second album produced by Greg with Hetfield and Ulrich, recorded at Metallica HQ through Metallica's label. So as I said, very cozy arrangement, but the songs on this one are way better than Hardwired to Self-Destruct. This album is much better. So we've got great riffing in there from Hetfield and Hammett. We've also got great guitar solos come back in from Kirk Hammett. Although a lot of them are very bluesy, they still sound great to me. It's got a real sound of Kill 'Em All on this album, Metallica's debut album, which is another great album. So yeah, 72 Seasons. It is long, it's 12 tracks. They've managed to condense the 12 tracks onto one CD on this one, but I think it's a great album, definitely worth picking up again and listening. So standout tracks for me: 72 Seasons, Screaming Suicide, Lux Eterna, and If Darkness Had a Sun. So that's 72 Seasons. In at number 7 is Metallica's most I suppose it's their most underrated album. It's Load from 1996. And honestly, listening back through this album, I think it's great. As a hard rock album, they were going for the kind of alternative or grunge sound, I suppose. They cut their hair for the album, as you can see on the back there. They're all wearing sunglasses and smoking cigars. Completely changed the image of the band when they went in this direction. But if you actually listen to the songs and the music, it's class, and the production is unbelievable on this album. So released in 1996, it's the 6th studio album by the band, has sold over 11.5 million to date, got to number 1 in 18 countries, released through Elektra Records with Vertigo in Europe, produced by Bob Rock with James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, recorded at the Plant in California. Obviously the 90s lineup in this one: Jason Newsted on bass. Standard tracks for me: Ain't My Bitch, Until It Sleeps, King Nutting, Hero of the Day, and I actually like Ronnie as well. But like this is a great album. You can stick this on from start to finish and don't really have to skip many tracks. You just have to frame it that it's not a metal album or a thrash album. It's a hard rock album with blues elements. So when you look at it like that and kind of think Alice in Chains, that kind of a vibe, then I think, yeah, it's a great album. Definitely stands up there. Okay, album number 6 from 2008 is Death Magnetic. Again, a great album. This was sort of Metallica's return to form following Saint Anger. They were getting back to their thrash roots. So released in 2008, the 9th studio album by the band. To date, it sold over 5 million copies, got to number 1 in 24 different countries, won 2 Grammy Awards. Released by Warner in the US and Vertigo in Europe. Produced by Rick Rubin. Now, just talk a little bit about the production on this album. The production, the dynamics were excessively compressed in the final mastering stage, which meant you got this wall of sound, which is not a good thing. It fed into the loudness wars. So basically, when producers and engineers were completing the final mastering stage for CDs, they wanted to up the volume so everything sounded louder than everything else, just like Motorhead. So as a result of that, this album became the album that had the lowest dynamic range due to compression in the mastering stage, and as a result it sounds so compressed that it's just really difficult to listen to. So it's unfortunate because it's a great album, and in terms of the songs, I think there's probably not a bad song on this album. It's absolutely fantastic, but if the production was better, I think it would be higher up in my list. So standout tracks for me: Broken, Beaten, Scarred, really like that one. The Day That Never Comes, Cyanide, Unforgiven 3, and My Apocalypse. So so Metallica also reverted to their format on this. So basically they had a format whereby, you know, the first song was a real trashy, fast-paced song. The 4th song was a ballad, so that's The Day That Never Comes. And then you had an instrumental song towards the end of the album, and they've stuck to that formula on this album. So that formula can be seen in Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Injustice for All. So I think this album stands up with those ones, but the reason it's not higher in my list is because of the production and the compression used. So it's a long album, 10 tracks, 75 minutes, but to be honest, it's one of the best longer albums that Metallica have. Okay, so we're into the top 5 now. This is where it gets real. So at number 5 is Kill 'Em All. Okay, debut album by Metallica, released in 1983, sold over 8 million equivalent units to date. Went triple platinum in the USA, produced by Paul Curcio, and recorded at Music America in Rochester, New York. The band for this one, Hetfield, Ulrich Hammett and Cliff Burton. Standard tracks for me, Four Horsemen, Whiplash, No Remorse, Seek and Destroy. It's 51 minutes long, 10 tracks on the album. Honestly, a fantastic debut. It's a little bit rough around the edges, but you can really hear Metallica's style, what they're going for. It's heavy riffs, it's fast, guitar solos are good. Really like this one, have to say. Kill 'Em All, debut album by Metallica, sits in at number 5. Okay, in at number 4 is Ride the Lightning. Released in 1984, second studio album by the band, sold nearly 12 million equivalent sales worldwide, gone 6 times platinum in the US, released on Megaforce Records in the US and Vertigo in Europe, produced by Metallica, assisted by Flemming Rasmussen and Mark Whittaker, recorded at Sweet Silence Studios in Copenhagen, Denmark. Obviously, band for this one is Hetfield, Ulrich Hammett and Cliff Burton. Standout tracks on this one, well, they're all standout tracks, to be honest. There's not a bad track on this album, Ride the Lightning. Production is as you'd expect, you know, it's budget production. Like, this was that they had Kill 'Em All, which was released on like independent records. This was their first major label record, but they still had a budget and they wanted to stick to their thrash roots. So even though they included their first ballad song, which was Fade to Black, song number 4, it still sounds a bit rough around the edges. I would have always loved to see what Bob Rock could do with this album, if he was able to remix and remaster, because I think it has the potential to be a much better album. But it is what it is. It's a record in time, and the songs are outstanding. It's just a fantastic album. So that's Metallica, Ride the Lightning at number 4. At number 3, we have Injustice for All. Okay, first album released by Metallica following the death of bassist Cliff Burton, released in 1988. First studio album by the band, has sold almost 16 million copies worldwide, or equivalent copies. Released through Elektra in the States and Vertigo in Europe. Produced by Flemming Rasmussen and Metallica. Recorded at 101 Studios in Los Angeles. The band for this one, so Hetfield, Ulrich Hammett, and it was Jason Newsted's first album with the band. No bad tracks on this album, to be honest. You can listen to this one the whole way through. Really, really good. 65 minutes and 9 tracks in total, which isn't too bad, isn't too long to get through. One criticism about this album is that the bass guitar is so low in the mix that it's barely audible. And I've listened to some of the versions of this album that have included bass in them. They're on YouTube, they're available if you go search them. But I think, to be honest, the bass lines are missing in this, and it's unfortunate because, again, it will probably be higher up the list if the bass lines were included in it. But the songs stand up, they're fantastic. They're verging on progressive rock, progressive metal, but they still hold that thrash sensibility that Metallica have. So yeah, honestly, a fantastic album, and I listen to this album very regularly. Okay, so that's Injustice for All. Into the top 2 now. My second favourite album by Metallica is Master of Puppets. Okay, I know a lot of people think it's their best album, and honestly, there's not a bad track on the album, and I think it is musically probably their strongest album. But the reason I haven't put it at number one. I'll explain when I get to number one. I think everyone can guess what that number one is going to be. So I'll just run through this album. Released in 1986, third studio album by Metallica. Sold almost 14 million copies worldwide to date. Gone 6 times platinum in the US. Released through Elektra Records in the US and Vertigo Records in Europe. Produced by Flemming Rasmussen and Metallica. Recorded at Sweet Silence Studios in Copenhagen, Denmark. The lineup for the band was Hetfield, Ulrich, Hammett and Cliff Burton. And it's 54 minutes long. It's got 8 songs on it. And to be honest, absolutely fantastic. Again, it's a metal album. So the production in the 80s, like for metal albums, they really didn't want to sound like all the hair metal and AOR that was happening at the time. So they were happy for it to be as it is. But honestly, I think this is another album that could be improved in terms of production. Some of it sounds, it just sounds dated. It's still a classic metal album, but I think the production could be a little bit better on it. Okay, so that's number 2. And then number 1, no surprise, it's the Black Album by Metallica. How more black could it be? No more black is the answer. Yeah, so look, this was the first album I picked up by Metallica when I started listening to them 25 years ago. And I know musically it's probably not the best album, but from a production standpoint, it's head and shoulders above the rest. When you take songwriting and production and pull them together, I think this album stands out on its own in terms of the Metallica back catalogue. So, released in 1991, 5th studio album by the band, has sold over 32 million copies equivalent to date. It got to number 1 in 10 countries worldwide. Released by Elektra in the US and Vertigo in Europe. Produced by Bob Rock with James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich. So Bob Rock obviously was famous for working with Bryan Adams, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi. So when Metallica decided to work with him, it was a complete change from where they had been in the 80s, where they were like an underground metal band doing it on their own terms. Now they've kind of they've enlisted a producer who knew how to get great rock music sounding good and get on the radio, and that's exactly what you get with this album. Like, I'm a massive classic rock fan, love hard rock. I love metal, more probably traditional metal than thrash metal, but to be honest, I think they hit the nail on the head with this album. Like, it sounds amazing. Even to this day, it sounds amazing. The guitars, the drums, bass, and of course James' vocals sound fantastic on this album. It was recorded at 101 Studios in Los Angeles, so the band returned there after And Justice for All. And yeah, for me, like, there's no tracks I really skip on this one. The struggle within the last track is probably one that I could take or leave, but the other 11 tracks are fantastic. But to me, it's not just about the songwriting. The tracks are fantastic, but it's the production that kicks them up a gear. The layering of vocals on the likes of Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven, double tracking vocals, stuff like the sound of the drums. So they basically recorded maybe, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 takes of each song, and then on the drum tracks they were able to cut sections of the songs and paste them together for the best take. So it was all about energy and groove, and like that's really what comes across on this album. It's got a great groove on it, very similar to AC/DC Back in Black, or what Pantera did later on in the 90s, just with that snare coming in just a little bit late that it's really just driving the song, and you can tap your foot to it. The riffs are fantastic. They're shorter songs. There's a lot more vocal melodies and different things being tried out. A lot more clean guitars. A lot more overdubs. So, like, I know James Hetfield, when he was talking about Enter Sandman, like, he had a guitar pan left for rhythm guitar, a guitar pan right for rhythm guitar, and one down the center. So a really chunky, riffy sound. And Bob Rock, like Bob Rock worked on the Whitesnake album 1987, which I know a lot of metal fans might not like that, but the guitar sound on that album from John Sykes is unbelievable, and that was all Bob Rock. Like, Bob Rock got in the studio with John Sykes, he sat down, they went through all the different amps, guitars, and they were able to get that massive rock sound. And this is what he's done here with James Hetfield. He sat down with James and they worked out how to get this huge rhythm guitar sound that drives all these tracks for Metallica. In terms of the bass, I think the bass sounds really good. It's nice and rounded, fits in great with the mix. And then, of course, lead guitar, some of the best guitar solos from Kirk Hammett on this album. Like the Unforgiven, the solo from the Unforgiven is absolutely fantastic. Wherever I May Roam is another brilliant guitar solo. And then you've got like Wolf and Man and The God That Failed. It's just a fantastic album. So look, that's my ranking of Metallica albums from worst to best. I'll just run through them again just to give you a brief overview at the end. So album number 11 was Saint Anger. 10 was Hardwired to Self-Destruct. 9 was Reload. 8 was 72 Seasons. 7 was Load. 6 was Death Magnetic. 5 was Kill 'Em All. 4 was Ride the Lightning. 3 and Justice for All. 2 Master of Puppets, and coming in the first place was the Black Album. So I hope you enjoyed my video, and I am sure there is loads of people that disagree with me, and that's great. So hopefully you can leave your top 11 albums from 11 to 1 in the comments, and we can get some discussion going here, because I'm really interested to see what people think. For me, Metallica, they're not just a metal band, they're also a rock band. So that's why like the likes of Load and the Black Album and stuff like that really appeals to me as well. I don't see Metallica through the lens of just a metal band and nothing else, but I know some people do. They see them as a metal band and they're not interested in anything that they've done that's rock or that's soft, and that's great. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but let me know in the comments what your opinion is, because I really want to see amongst the fans out there what's the most popular album, because this debate happens all the time, and some people think albums are underrated, albums are overrated. Some people prefer production styles. Some people prefer heavy riffing, whatever the case may be. So please let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll talk to you on the next video. Bye bye now.